Well, earlier I spoke to the Shadow Business and Trade Secretary Jonathan Reynolds from the party conference, and during the speech by Rachel Reeves, they promised to bring back wealth, opportunity and pride to Britain. But Labour is not normally known as the party of business, so I started asking him what's different now.
The first part of that is that we have changed. We're very clearly a very different political party to the one that lost in 2019, and the scale of business engagement here in conference is not just at record levels for us, it's at record levels compared to the Conservative Party and the things we're putting forward. So whether that's industrial strategy or our green prosperity plan, getting Britain building again by sorting out the planning system, these are the things that business is asking of us. And of course the contrast is with a government which over 13 years has not delivered, and frankly last week ended up down some real rabbit holes and broken promises that have dismayed the business community. So look, we don't think the job is done. We'll always keep working hard to do it, but I think there has been a sea change in business opinion in the UK, and that we are the ones who can quite rightly say we're commanding that respect and that relationship that is so necessary to basically getting business investment up, productivity higher and better economic growth across the UK.
Yeah, I mean, that word again, confident, that Keir Starmer used in interviews on Sunday as well. It's asking a lot of businesses, a lot of the public to just rely on that promise, to be confident in you. In terms of the changes that are going to be made, Rachel Reeves talking today about actually changing that limit back to 2030 for the sale of petrol cars. They won't be sold beyond that date, just after Sunak pushed it to 2035. You say that's going to deliver certainty for the car industry, really?
Once you've got a target in place, as the government have, messing around with it was, frankly, the last thing that was needed. And I think, to be frank, people can no longer trust any promise the government makes, where we're making a very clear, consistent commitment. We're not making a change, we're sticking with what it was, but there's a lot more support available from us in terms of the wider policy environment, whether that's the rules of origin that would be in place with our relationship to selling cars into the European Union, or the apprenticeship levy and the skills that people need, or simply how the rest of the system works and consumers having confidence in it. And of course, it's always worth saying this is about new vehicles, not about second-hand vehicles, where of course most people do tend to buy their car from.
Well, absolutely key in maintaining that confidence with the public and with business is not over-promising and under-delivering. And one of the key issues about electric vehicles is the infrastructure. There isn't the charging network there currently. I mean, how are you going to get that in time? That's a big promise.
What we put forward as part of our comprehensive automotive sector plan today, particularly on the charging infrastructure, is that we will put the targets on local areas, but we will then devolve the funding with that. So there's around about a fund of £950 million the government already has, which is unspent. It's the Rapid Charging Fund. It's not going anywhere at the minute. So by putting the responsibility, the guarantee that these things will go in, but give the funding as well, that's how we'll deliver that. But I think you're right to say that's the principal issue concerning the public right now.
Tell me a little bit about what's being called this National Wealth Fund, this idea that we're going to encourage more investment in British businesses, in the sectors. How is that actually going to go about? Because at the moment we're absolutely lagging other countries when it comes to investment as a share of GDP in British businesses. You promise you're going to put us back on the map, but how?
So what you don't want is a situation the government had with Tata around the gigafactory in Somerset, where frankly we needed that so badly. We had one party to negotiate with, we had to get it across the line. It's a very weak position to be in. We want to be clear about what we're putting forward, but what the qualifying criteria will be to get that public investment, and crucially, how we'll protect that public money if we do spend it.
Funding this, obviously, we're looking at borrowing, are we looking at tax rises? This is what concerns people. The ideas, you know, a lot of people can get behind, but the cost of it all.
We've got some specific promises, some switch spends for where we think there has to be some immediate relief to improve public services. So we would, for instance, scrap the non-dom tax regime, that's for the super rich. That money would go into the health service. We would end the tax breaks that private education has in terms of VAT and business rates. That would go into the state education system. But these are short-term ways to relieve some of the pressures, to get public services working better, and they'd make an impact. But the long-term reality is, if we have an economy that is growing as it is, a lot of these questions will be about what is kept and what is reduced rather than what goes into it in addition in future.
Finally, you've mentioned industries, you've mentioned gigafactories and steelworks and the like, which makes us want to ask you about unions as well. There's been a situation of ongoing strikes in this country for a very long time. What are you going to do about it?
There have been far more days lost to industrial action under this government than there were under the last Labour government. We would go back to the employment framework that existed under the last Labour government. But crucially, if you are not responding to how difficult people are finding these times, you will have these problems. No worker wants to take industrial action, but if the government won't listen, and I'll be frank, I think in some public services, the government have tried to use industrial action as a cover for their own poor performance. We wouldn't have anything to do with that. We'll make the whole economy grow faster, grow better, give people real living standards, and I think that's the way forward through all of these problems.
It's a lot of promises, a lot of plans, and the confidence is going to be absolutely key in that. Jonathan Reynolds MP, thanks for making time to speak to us.